Every game has a target audience, a specific demographic that's expected to enjoy it. Some games cast a wide net to try to appeal to as many players as possible. Some like to niche down to attract a certain subculture. Some games are easy to play and easy to learn for the sake of a casual audience. And some? Well, some are made for those who want to be pushed to their limits. For there just so happens to be an entire genre of games dedicated to those hardcore players who crave challenge. It goes by several names: Danmaku Shooter, Curtain Fire, Shmup, or my personal favorite, Bullet Hell. This style of top-down shooter is characterized by having the screen absolutely filled with bullet patterns that'll kill you on contact. It's a brutal style of game that attracts a very dedicated kind of fan, and one series towers over the rest: the Touhou Project. The Touhou Project is an ongoing series of bullet hell games that's been around since 1996. It's not often that you see a game series with so many sequential iterations, and I was curious. How did Touhou grow and change from 1996 all the way to 2019, which is when the most recent game came out? So I went and played the games, all 22 of them, in order to find out. So now, please join me as we take a look at the evolution of the Touhou Project. Before I really get into it, I'd like to quickly address a couple things. Firstly, for this video, I only looked at the official products. There are countless derivative works out there, including numerous fan-made video games. I did not touch those. There's also an ongoing series of official Touhou fighting games, which I'm also not going to be discussing here. I'm only looking at the bullet hell games for this video. Secondly, I know that finding out how to actually play the damn games can be a bit of a barrier to new players, and not gonna lie, it was a bit of a pain for me as well. So in the description, I'm going to leave 2 links in case any of you are interested in trying the games out for yourself. The first is the purchasing guide from the Touhou Wiki. Most of the games past number 10 are available on Steam, though for previous games your only real legal option is Japanese resellers. The second link is to Moria Shrine, a Touhou fan site that has downloads for every single game, including ones not even listed on the purchasing guide. I know that piracy is a touchy subject, but here in the West, Touhou is pretty heavily pirated due to either lackluster or outright lack of Western distribution. If you want my opinion, any game without a direct, downloadable purchase from the developer can be ethically pirated. You do not support the developer by buying from a reseller, so if that's your only legal option, there's no real harm done by pirating. Plus, 1 through 5 can't really be played at all without pirating them. Regardless, both options are available to you, make your own decisions. Now, if at any point you think I'm doing a good job, please consider leaving a like. It really helps me out and it lets YouTube know that my content is worth promoting. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into it. To start things off, I'd like to briefly mention why 1 through 5 are unique. Hell, just earlier I pointed out how it's damn near impossible to even buy them anywhere. Well, that's because these games were actually not made for Windows like most early computer games, but for the PC-98, a series of computers that were popular in Japan before Microsoft basically took over the industry. As such, you'll actually need an emulator to play these games unless you happen to have a PC-98 lying around and can scrounge up a hard copy of the games themselves. So going in, I knew that Touhou was a series of bullet hell games. So imagine my surprise when I booted up Touhou 1, highly responsive to prayers, and found that the first iteration of an iconic bullet hell series isn't even a traditional bullet hell. In fact, it's more of an Arkanoid-style breakout game. There are these cards all over the screen. You have to clear them out, but the only way to do that is by hitting it with your yin-yang orb. You do that by attacking it, either with a ranged attack that shoots directly upward or one of several melee-centric attacks, which consist of a slash, a slide, and a spin kick. This serves to adjust the speed and direction of the orb. You know, breakout. The big difference is that the orb can actually bounce off the ground, and if it hits you rather than one of your attacks, you die. You also have a limited number of bombs which can be used to immediately hit everything on screen, clear out hazards, and give you a short burst of invincibility. Clear all the cards on the stage and you move on to the next level. Additionally, every 5 stages you get a boss fight where instead of cards, there's just a baddie that you have to hit a bunch of times who will be trying to kill you. As you progress, you'll come across bumpers and portals which mess with the movement of the orb, and turrets which will shoot at you. Obviously, getting hit costs a life. You can actually cancel out bullets with your own shots, and you can deflect them with your melee attacks. As you hit the cards, they'll sometimes drop point items which, as you'd expect, give you points, though they'll actually increase in value as long as you don't miss any. They can go from being worth 1,000 points to over 65,000, though the value resets as soon as you miss one. You can also rarely get bombs as pickups. You gain extra lives every 400,000 points, and once you lose all your lives, it's game over. You do have the option of using a continue and restarting at the beginning of the stage, but this will reset your score to 0 and it'll lock you out of the good ending until you restart from the beginning of the game. Now let me tell you something. This game is fucking hard. Even after getting over that initial learning curve of getting comfortable with the controls and having a decent idea of how the orb moves, I found myself dying all the damn time. When I'm not getting killed by the same fucking orb I need to use to clear the cards, I'm running into an enemy attack, failing to dodge all the shit that gets thrown at you from the bosses, or I take too long to finish a stage and bullets just rain down from the sky, because that happens if you don't get a move on. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in order to get a good ending, you have to beat the game without using a continue. I probably used about 20 continues on the final boss alone. This game, while short, has challenge in spades. But here's the thing. On a gameplay level, Highly Responsive to Prayers is surprisingly polished. The controls are tight and responsive, the level design is pretty good, the bosses are each unique and engaging, the performance is incredibly smooth, and the physics are pretty spot on for the most part. Plus, for as hard as the game is, it has an absolutely sky-high skill ceiling. I could probably dedicate the next 10 years of my life to this game and still have ample room to improve. On top of the baseline difficulty of just clearing the game, cards are worth increasing amount of points the more you can hit without letting the orb touch the ground. And just like point pickups can scale up to over 65 times their original value, cards can go from a value of 100 to over 25,000. Balancing keeping the orb in the air and collecting point pickups, which disappear a fraction of a second after touching the ground, all while trying not to fucking die, all goes into making this game extremely skill expressive, which is something I appreciate. One thing that the game isn't great about, and this is a trend with most of the series, is explaining its own mechanics. I actually had to look some stuff up before I properly understood how exactly this game works. I mean, the spin kick makes survival a whole lot easier, but I had to take to the internet to find out that it was even possible. Good design overall, but it could have been more clear in-game. But that being said, I do like it when a game is willing to be shamelessly tough. Now, I can't talk about any Touhou game without mentioning the music. Touhou has a reputation for having some absolutely kick-ass soundtracks that are the source of countless covers, remixes, and references. Even if you've never heard of Touhou before clicking on this video, you've probably heard Touhou music and just didn't realize it. Here, let me give you a few examples. Recognize any of those songs, or at least the melodies? That was Bad Apple from Touhou 4, Flowering Night from Touhou 9, and UN Owen Was Her from Touhou 6, respectively. There's a reason people love the music of Touhou, and it's not just because of the cult following the series has. The music of Touhou is exciting and engaging. It really gets you pumped as you're playing, and it can make an already tense encounter that much more butt-clenching. The PC-98 era of Touhou games all have a distinctly chiptune sound to them due to the technology available at the time. It's the same kind of thing you'd hear in a lot of early console and arcade games. I do like both the retro soundtrack and the music from the modern games, and each has its own feel. I know I'm going on a lot here, but that's because I kind of want to get it all out now instead of going on a tangent about the music with each game. But yeah, the music is fucking amazing, and don't let the fact that I'm not really going to talk about it much more get in the way of that. The story is practically non-existent, at least for this game. No dialogue, and a very short intro and ending sequence that I guess technically counts as a narrative, but with no real substance whatsoever. I do think that Highly Responsive to Prayers is at its weakest when it comes to visuals. Now, the PC-98 comes with technical limitations. I understand that. I'm not going to knock the game for its low resolution or awkward animations. What I will criticize is the poor color design. While I understand that the developer didn't have a massive color palette available to him, he could have done better than this. For starters, I found the backgrounds to be very cluttered and messy. Too much shit going on that I didn't feel actually contributed to anything. Furthermore, sometimes the color choices made it hard to see actual things that would affect my gameplay. I mean, look at this. These are bumpers that'll make the orb bounce away and they blend into the background. Look, I really understand that there were technical limitations, but gameplay elements could have been put against a contrasting background. I mean, take a look at this boss fight. The background is mostly just black, and I had absolutely zero problems with visibility. I feel like a lot of these backdrops weren't very well thought out, and it does hurt the overall quality of the game. Overall, highly responsive to prayers is not what I expected at all. It's an interesting start to a series that took a very different turn. In a way, I'm kinda sad that this is the only breakout style game of the series. I think this core formula could have been improved and refined into something absolutely incredible had they not shifted into a traditional bullet hell format. I definitely recommend trying this game out because even in 2020, I don't think I've ever played anything quite like it. Okay, so now we're getting into the traditional bullet hell style that defines the series. The concept is quite simple. It's a vertically scrolling shooter and enemies will try to kill you, sometimes by attacking directly at you, sometimes attacking in a set pattern. It's worth noting that enemies will appear in set numbers at set times. Sometimes their position is randomized, but you absolutely have the ability to just learn when to expect certain enemies, so it's not purely reactive. There are several kinds of pickups. You get bomb and life pickups, which are mostly given as a reward for killing specific enemies. You have point items, which interestingly are worth more the closer you are to the top of the screen when you collect them. And you also have power pickups. As you collect certain numbers of these power pickups, your attack will be upgraded. Naturally, you want to do this so you can maximize your DPS, but once you max out your power, the pickups will start to scale in point value as you collect more. They start out at a measly 10 points, but scale up immensely, the exact amount varying depending on what difficulty you're playing. You lose a bit of power whenever you're hit, and this will reset the point value of power pickups. Just like the first game, you get extra lives at certain point milestones. You can also continue right where you left off if you lose all lives, though you have a limited number of continues available to you, and like previously, using a continue locks you into the bad ending. In order to get the good ending, you have to beat the game on normal or higher without using any continues, which is known as a 1 credit clear or 1cc. The game is divided into 6 stages, each with a mini-boss around the halfway point and a boss at the end. These enemies normally have bigger health pools as well as specific attack patterns that you have to learn and avoid if you don't want to die. After killing a boss, you get a nice little score boost based on how well you performed in the stage. One mechanic that can be a little hard for new bullet hell players is that most bullet hells, with Touhou being no exception, do not actually align your character's hitbox with the character model. What I mean by it is that most non-bullet hell games will have it so if a hazard comes into contact with the player character, it'll register as a hit. Well, with most bullet hell games, your hitbox is actually much smaller. It's typically a tiny dot, usually no more than a couple pixels at most, at the center of the character model. That means that you can actually weave through patterns that look impossible at a glance. It's one of those things that can be kinda tough to deal with initially, but I think it's worth raising the skill floor a bit because it allows for greater long-term challenge and lets the player do a lot of really cool avoidance techniques. The only downside is that you can't actually see your hitbox in the story of Eastern Wonderland. Later on in the series, there are ways to view it, but for the earlier games, you kinda have to just rely on muscle memory. It's also worth noting that movement speed is fairly slow at the best of times. Later games would have a much more light and floaty movement scheme, and going back to the PC-98 titles can feel a bit sluggish in comparison. Plus, it's noticeably harder to collect distant pickups because your movement speed might not be enough to get to the other side of the screen before it falls off. One other thing I'll briefly mention is that just about every game in the series, starting from Story of Eastern Wonderland, has an extra stage that typically requires you to 1cc the game at least once, and the early games require you to do it on normal. Now, normal in Touhou is not the same as normal in other games. I'm pretty good at video games in general, but getting a 1cc on normal is a pretty big ask for me until I improve. Plus, the extra stages themselves are generally comparable to, if not tougher than doing a stage on Lunatic, which is the highest difficulty the game has to offer. So that's why I won't really be talking about the extra stages in this video, even though some of them are undeniably iconic. I'm just not good enough yet. In this game, you can also pick between 3 different attack modes, which effectively act as different characters. It's pretty simple, and it dictates how much of your attack upgrades will go to your main shots, which are lower damage with a bit of a random spread compared to your yin-yang orbs, which are higher damage and shoot straight forward from your sides, with movement speed being the trade-off for DPS. You can either go with really high speed and low damage and precision, the exact opposite, or a more balanced option. It's pretty basic as far as these kinds of systems go, but it works. Visually, the game is still pretty blocky and primitive, but it's noticeably cleaner than the first game. It was also noticeably better in the shit blending into the background department. It wasn't completely resolved, but it's clear that more care was put into visibility. I will say that the projectiles that would come at you were kinda boring to look at, mostly just being plain white dots and lines. They work for what they are, but it just doesn't have that visual flair that the series would become known for. Additionally, the boss attack patterns aren't as showy in this game. Touhou is defined by its bosses that launch these beautiful patterns of colorful bullets that fill up the screen, and while Story of Eastern Wonderland has functional and fun attacks, they don't have that wow factor of later games. Still, pretty solid for the first bullet hell of the franchise. There's more story in this game than the previous, with short bursts of dialogue with each successive boss. But here's the thing, Touhou was originally in Japanese and the translation is not very good. It's certainly understandable, not like it's a machine translation or anything, but while you can understand what's going on, I don't feel like the translation properly conveyed the feeling and intent behind the dialogue. The series is known for having your characters toss witty banter back and forth with the bosses. I didn't really feel that with this game, and I think it's probably down to the translation. But I can't really fault the developer for that because none of the games in the series are officially translated, instead relying on fan-made patches. These patches do get better in later games, but I think the early games do suffer from this subpar translation work, and I'm sure the dialogue has a lot more charm in the original Japanese. Overall, this is a fun game and pretty well done considering it's the first bullet hell of the franchise. I do genuinely enjoy it. Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream is a bit different. Yes, it's a bullet hell, but a head-to-head where you face off against an opponent, and instead of just making it to the end and killing the boss, you have to make your opponent lose. So right off the bat, you can see two screens. You'll be the one on the left, and the AI is on the right. It starts off just like any other bullet hell, and as you do shit within the game, you'll charge this meter at the bottom. You can hold the attack button to charge up an attack, and depending on how much you charge, different things will happen. 1 bar gives you a strong attack for dealing with things on your side, 2 lets you send an attack pattern over to your opponent, 3 sends a stronger attack pattern, 4 will send a boss fight over. And this is all on top of whatever regular hazards the game has, and the opponent will be doing the same to you. So I really like this idea conceptually, but I can't say I'm super thrilled about the game itself. For starters, your regular attack is just pressing the Z key repeatedly instead of holding it down like the other games because holding it down charges your special. After a while, I found it really annoying to have to keep mashing the Z key and it really bogged down my enjoyment of the game. Also, I can't say that the core design really feels faithful to the Touhou brand. The introduction of all these attack patterns from enemies and the possibility of having a boss fight is interesting, but I feel it adds an element of randomness that goes against the core philosophy of the series, where you're normally encouraged to learn the games inside and out so you can prepare for each challenge. Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream feels so much more reactive than proactive, and I didn't really like it. Furthermore, I especially disliked how luck-based it could feel. If I send over an attack pattern or a boss, I have no way of knowing if the AI will clear it like a pro or if they'll get completely ass-blasted. So I don't feel like I'm playing to improve, more like I'm playing to get a lucky dice roll to clear the level. The one thing I do appreciate is that the game actually allows you to go against your friends in local head-to-head. I didn't test this out, but I'd imagine it's pretty good fun when you can have that actual back and forth. There are also a bunch of characters who all play a little differently from each other, so there is some variety if you enjoy the core gameplay loop. Visually, I think Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream is a step down from its predecessor. I'm not a fan of the color scheme, text pop-ups and warnings disappear way too quickly for you to read them, and this is the first game to really show you the character portraits. Now, the Touhou character portraits have always been pretty bad. The character design is good, and I mean really good, especially with a lot of the bosses, but the art is just not. It does improve over time, but they never really end up being all that good, and in Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream, they look particularly bad in my opinion. Like, they failed at making anime girls cute. Just let that sink in. Overall, I can understand why this game could appeal to people, especially with friends, but it's really just not for me. I didn't enjoy really anything about it over any of the other games, and certain decisions, like the need to mash the Z key, really turned me away. I think this was a case of a great concept but piss-poor execution, and Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream stands as the only Touhou game that I actually dislike. I can tell you right now that I will absolutely not be going back to this game. Okay, things should start moving faster now that I've already explained the baseline mechanics of Touhou. Lotus Land's story is very similar to number 2 on a mechanical level, with the same kinds of movement, dodging, tiny hitbox, and auto-scrolling playstyle. However, it does add a few new mechanics, 3 of which will become core mechanics for the series moving forward. The first of these new core mechanics is Focus. What Focus does is when you hold the shift key, it'll slow your movement speed by a decent amount. This makes it a little easier to perform precise maneuvers. This mechanic gets expanded upon in later games, but at its core, this is what it is. Even if you discount the significant gameplay implications of Focus in future games, just being able to slow your movement speed for precise dodging is such an incredible quality of life feature, and it makes the game overall much less frustrating to play. The second core mechanic to be added is Grazing. Basically, if a bullet or laser comes close to damaging you, but not quite, you'll get points for it and it'll add to your score bonus at the end of the stage. The window for Grazing seems to be about the size of the character character model, maybe a tiny bit bigger. This is something that I really like because it gives an extra avenue for point scoring, which is something that can keep up the challenge even for the high-skilled players. Plus, the way Touhou works in general is that since most of the games reward extra lives based on score, you're actually encouraged to optimize your point game as much as possible, even if you're still struggling just to clear the games. Grazing adds an additional layer to everything, and one thing I noticed is that even though I have a long way to go in my Touhou journey, I make the effort to go for big grazes that I know I can do safely. Because if that extra point boost pushes me over the threshold for an extra life, that gives me a better chance of surviving to the end, while also training me to score hunt before it even becomes my primary concern, so I won't have to completely relearn how I play once baseline survival becomes easy. The third mechanic is one that a lot of new players, myself included, don't really make full use of: death bombing. Basically, when you get hit, you have this tiny window to use a bomb and not take damage. In most games, this window is 8 frames, or 0.133 seconds considering they run at 60 FPS. What this means is that you can't reactively death bomb. You have to be ready for it before you get hit because the input delay on even the best hardware, combined with the human reaction time, simply won't allow it. It's definitely an advanced ability, and I find it fascinating even though I can't use it in any practical sense. Lotus Land's story also has a mechanic known as Dream. Basically what this does is adds an additional type of collectible. As you collect more of these, your dream value goes up. This will make the point items worth more and can significantly increase your end stage bonus depending on your dream value and how many individual point items you've picked up. If you get hit, the dream bonus goes down one stage. It's a nice little way to optimize your score, and it rewards players who can manage to clear stages without getting hit. You get a choice between two characters: Reimu, the protagonist of the prior games, or Marisa, who was one of the bosses in number 2. Each character has 2 different shot types they can take. In essence, there are 4 different configurations you can play, though the core gameplay remains the same. This also means that there are 4 different sets of good and bad endings to collect. Another change is that now, bosses have an actual health bar shown on the side of the screen. Additionally, they have clearly defined phases. At certain health thresholds, they'll enter an attack phase where their health will decrease much more slowly and their attack pattern will be different. There's also a timer on screen for each phase. If you can clear the phase fast enough, you get a score bonus. Time out and you get nothing, though the boss will immediately move on to the next phase at that point. Visually, I'd say it's an improvement over its predecessors, though not a substantial one. I do actually kinda like how the character portraits look for the most part. They're still not amazing, but I feel like here they've been cleaned up enough so that they do kinda fit with the retro aesthetic of the game. And this game really makes me regret the lack of quality translation. So many of the dialogues feel like they should be funny, but they just aren't. I would love to see someone go through and give these games a proper translation. I appreciate that they're translated at all, but I feel like we non-Japanese players are missing out. Overall, I'd say this is a solid entry and exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for in a sequel. It took the core elements people loved about its predecessor, cleaned things up a bit, and added a few new bells and whistles. Solid. Just like the game before, Mystic Square is effectively more of the same, but with a fresh coat of paint. The core mechanics are the same, and the only major change to the game's system is a total rework of the dream mechanic from Lotus Land's story. The original dream system is scrapped entirely, and instead you get a dream meter that fills up by doing things like killing enemies, collecting point items at the top of the screen, or finding a dream pickup. It's lowered by getting hit, using bombs, or missing point items. The dream gauge directly impacts how high up you have to be to get the most out of point items, which makes them easier to max out. And once you max the gauge out, point items start to be worth a shitload of points depending on the difficulty, and you get the max value no matter where you collect them. There are also additional bonuses at the end of the stage for not getting hit and for not using bombs. One thing I do have to mention is that I really like the bosses in this game as opposed to the other PC 98 titles. This is the first time that I really started to feel that wow factor in the boss patterns, particularly those later into the game. Everything else is pretty on par with the previous game. Overall, I'd have to say that this is probably my favorite of the PC 98 era, and it just feels like an even more polished version of the last game. Out with the old and in with the new. Embodiment of Scarlet Devil is the first Touhou game to be made for Windows, and with it comes a whole host of mostly cosmetic changes alongside a soft reboot of the series. Firstly, and most obviously, the retro aesthetic is gone and replaced with newer textures. Now, the game came out in 2002, so obviously it's going to look dated by today's standards, but this was a big change, and one that I think overall was for the better. Not necessarily on its own, but as a baseline for future games to build off of. I think this new art style did a lot to make bullet patterns have more potential to be pretty. The game also feels noticeably more floaty and fast than the PC98 titles, with movement speed being faster across the board. I personally like this change a lot. The game feels more free, less sluggish overall, and I feel like I want to master the Windows titles more so than the PC98. The music is also a little more free in its expression, no longer being limited to the chiptune sounds of the PC98. While some tracks certainly do retain a chiptune influence, there's a noticeably greater variety of sounds on offer in all soundtracks moving forward, with different instrumentals and even a decent amount of experimentation with musical genre. It's nice. So the same baseline mechanics exist as with the previous games. It's still a bullet hell after all. However, there are a few changes worth noting. Firstly, the dream mechanic is just gone. No more. One thing the series likes to do is add new mechanics to one game and then remove it later, and 2 different iterations of Dream were basically the first instance of that. I do like it overall, though I have mixed feelings about the different individual mechanics. It gives each game a real sense of identity, and it makes it worth going back to the majority of Touhou games on their own merits because they have something on offer that newer games don't. It's a nice little touch. Now, one new addition to this game is a mechanic that once again became a core part of the franchise and is probably my single favorite quality of life feature, the item get borderline. Now, that's a stupid name, so it's colloquially referred to as the point of collection, or POC. The way it works is that when you're at max power, if you move to the part of the screen where point values are worth the most, all pickups on screen will magnet towards you. I really like this. It helps to reduce that painful feeling of missing items that there's no way you'd be able to pick up, while also adding an additional bit of risk versus reward. And it also rewards players for learning enemy wave patterns. If you know a break is coming up, you can zip up top to collect everything with no fear of death. It is such a good mechanic, and I am so happy they added it in. They also added another core mechanic to the series, though this one is more minor. Whenever you clear a boss phase, any bullets on screen disappear and are converted into points, which scale up in value the more you collect. This can actually be very significant if you can time a boss kill correctly so that the screen is filled with bullets rather than being almost empty. More of an advanced tactic, but still a nice little bonus for all players. Focus also received a bit of an update. Now, when you focus, your secondary ability will be fired from in front of you rather than from the side, effectively acting as a focus fire. Oh hey, look at that. This makes it good for targeting specific enemies, most notably bosses, who you'll likely want to be focusing on anyway due to their often chaotic attacks. Another thing this game did is it made some minor alterations to the boss phase mechanic from before. Now it combines the time bonus and the bonus for clearing special attacks together into an all or nothing kind of deal. It's also been given a name, spell cards, which you can collect by clearing it without losing a life or a bomb. It's functionally the same as the phases from previous games, but it's worth mentioning the changes because future games do expand on it. And I will say that starting with this game, Touhou finally has those amazing pretty bullet patterns that I was excited for. Even attacks that aren't all that tough to deal with will have these beautiful patterns filling the screen, and I know it's mostly an aesthetic thing, but I love it. This is also the first game in the series to feature a proper practice mode where you can play around with each individual stage without having to go to them all the way from the start. When you clear a stage with a character in normal play, you unlock that stage at that difficulty for that character in practice mode. I do think that having to beat the stage to unlock it kinda defeats the purpose of practice mode in the first place, but it can be helpful for practicing tricky parts of the game without having to start over from the beginning. I personally found it very helpful for practicing the Sakuya mid-stage boss fight in Stage 5. That goddamn misdirection spell card is legitimately harder than any of her spell cards during the end stage boss fight, and the ability to practice it is greatly appreciated. The translation work is also a bit better, but not quite there yet. There's definitely instances where the tone reads like a character made a witty quip, but it still doesn't feel all that natural. Overall, I feel like this game was a big step up from its predecessors and a great way to kick off the Windows era. This should be no surprise, but at its core, Perfect Cherry Blossom is a very similar game to Embodiment of Scarlet Devil. It's just that it's got a few new bits and bobs and a new mechanic to play around with. The main gimmick of Perfect Cherry Blossom is the cherry mechanic, and buckle in because this gets a tiny bit complicated. There are 3 separate but related values that go into it: Cherry, Cherry Plus, and Cherry Max. The most important one for scoring is Cherry, which goes up as you shoot things and when bullets are cleared at the end of a spell card. There are also pickups that can give a little boost. It goes down whenever you lose a life or use a bomb. Point items collected above the point of collection are worth whatever your Cherry value is. Cherry cannot exceed your Cherry Max level. Cherry Plus is a value that goes up at the same rate as Cherry, and once it hits 50,000 you get what's known as a supernatural border. This will give you a shield for the next 9 seconds that can block a single hit. During that time, grazing will increase your Cherry Max value, the value being higher if you're not focused, and pickups will automatically magnet towards you with point items being worth their max value. If you get hit or press the bomb key, your shield will be destroyed and every bullet on screen will be cleared and turned into mini point items. but if you manage to last the entire time without getting hit, your cherry max will go up by 10,000 and you'll get a nice chunk of bonus points. Regardless whether you succeed or fail, once the border is gone, your cherry plus will be reset to 0 and you can begin building it up again. It sounds really complicated, and on paper it is, but its core effect on gameplay is simple. Get cherry until you get the border and try to keep it to boost your max cherry value so you can make point items worth more. I find this mechanic to be fun enough. Nothing too spectacular, but it's an engaging mechanic that does reward high skill. Aside from that, focus received a few changes in this game. The smaller change, though it's still an impactful one, is that when you're focused, you can actually view your hitbox. Yep, I love it. It makes it a bit easier to learn the game. Very welcome change, and this persists throughout the rest of the series. A bigger change comes in shot types. Basically, when focused, you have a separate attack and a different bomb. Most of the future games had some variation on this, and many will actually combine what were originally separate firing modes into one character. I personally find this to be fun enough. It gives the game a bit more flavor, though I don't think it's quite as impactful as it seems on the surface. Another thing is that you can collect spell cards, which is what happens when you qualify for the bonus. This doesn't do much on its own, however, the extra stage, which is already very hard mind you, has its own hard mode, and one of the requirements to even unlock it is to collect 60 spell cards cumulatively across all characters and shot types. It's also worth noting that in this game, extra lives are awarded based on the number of point items collected rather than score, with your progress being shown in your HUD. So yeah, like before, same game with a new coat of paint and a few new toys to play around with. Imperishable Night is an interesting one. Again, as before, the baseline mechanics are the same as previous games, though this one comes with a few really neat mechanics that play into one another. Firstly, instead of selecting a single character at the start, you instead select one of 4 teams of 2, each consisting of 1 human and 1 yokai. The yokai effectively counts as a secondary shot gameplay-wise, and you choose between the two via in-game focusing. When unfocused, the human will fire. When focused, the yokai will. At the bottom of the screen there's a yokai meter that goes from negative 100% to 100%. The more you do unfocused damage, the lower the gauge will go, and vice versa if you're focused. When you reach either negative 80% or 80%, you'll get special bonuses. Point items will be doubled in value, and on top of that, you'll be able to gain extra of a pickup unique to Imperishable Night, Time Orbs, which are automatically collected. Time Orbs are primarily gained from killing enemies, though if you're at negative 80% or lower, you'll also gain them as you deal damage. If you're at 80% or higher, you'll gain bonus orbs from killing enemies, as well as grazing during boss fights. Time Orbs will increase the value of point items the more you collect, but more importantly than that, they work with the rather unique progression mechanic of the game. See, the way the game works is that instead of having a certain number of continues available, it's a race against the in-universe clock. The game starts at 11 PM and you must clear the final stage before 5 AM or it's game over. Passing from one stage to the next takes 1 hour, and each continue costs a half hour. This leaves room for 1 continue before you're fucked. However, time orbs play into this as well. Each stage has a time orb goal. If you can reach the goal at the end of the stage, the transition to the next will only take a half hour instead of a full hour. It's a neat little system, though this facet is kinda pointless if you're going for a 1cc. But in addition to basically giving you an extra continue, if you reach the time orb goal, the boss will use an extra spell card after the fight called a last word. This differs from a normal spell card in a couple of ways. Firstly, if you lose the spell card bonus by getting hit or using a bomb, the fight is just done. The boss stops attacking and leaves. Secondly, if you do get hit, you won't lose a life. This is a chance at a bonus, not a punishment. If you succeed, you'll get a nice chunk of bonus points and some time orbs. Definitely a nice little bit of flair. They also changed up the point of collection. Same rules as before, but in addition, if you're focused above the point of collection, it'll activate even if not at max power. Grazing also got a small update. Now, as you graze, the value of point items starts going up, though if you're at 80% or above, this happens faster. It's a nice little additional reward for players willing to take that extra bit of risk. Imperishable Night also introduces spell practice, which acts as a practice mode for any spell card you've encountered, though not necessarily collected, with any specific team. You do have to beat the game once to unlock it, which I think kinda defeats the fucking purpose of a practice mode, but it's still a welcome addition. It's also worth noting that spell practice operates under last word mechanics, so 1 life and no bombs. There's also collectibles awarded as you clear spells in spell practice. Another neat addition to the game is after you unlock the extra stage for all 4 teams, you have the ability to play the game solo, meaning instead of a team of 1 human and 1 yokai, you can just choose a single one of them. Not the biggest change ever, but it does give a bit more variety and extends the playtime for completionists. Visually, they changed up the art style a bit, most noticeably with the character portraits, which are still pretty bad and disfigured. I do think the art looks pretty crisp from a gameplay standpoint. In-game, I have absolutely none of the old issues of shit blending into the background. It did get substantially better when Touhou made the switch to Windows, but there were still issues here and there. I think Imperishable Night is the first game that really nailed it in that regard. I actually started getting a sense of the somewhat absurdist humor during the pieces of dialogue, and the world of Touhou really started to show its charm. I've said it before, but I think the character design in Touhou is phenomenal, both visually and in their personalities. It's just that the portraits are ass and the writing was held back by the translation work. It's really nice to see it get better as time goes on. Overall, I do like the novelty of the time mechanic, and it's just as tight as any other Touhou game up to this point. Plus, if you're a completionist, you'll get a lot of mileage out of this game compared to previous ones. Here we have another head-to-head Touhou game, the second and as it stands final one of the franchise and the only one of the Windows generation. To me, it feels like they brought Versus mode up to the, at the time, modern standard. I will say that I have a lot of the same criticisms for Phantasmagoria of Flower View as I do for Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream. However, I do think that all the quality of life upgrades that came to the series since then did a lot to make the game more enjoyable. But that of course doesn't change the fact that there's still an element of luck that doesn't exist in the more traditional games, and it's still a lot more reactive than I'd like, though that's kind of the nature of simulated PvP compared to the pure PvE of the rest of the series. That being said, I do have to praise one big change they made that really did make me enjoy the game a lot more than 3. There's an option for a charge type in the settings. The default, Charge mode, operates under the same system as 3, where you need to mash the Z key to fire and hold to charge your battle gauge. Slow mode changes things up so that you can hold Z to continuously fire a la the rest of the series, but that'll also put you into focus, allowing the shift key to be used for charging. Not exactly a perfect solution, but I hated Charge mode in 3, and it's one of the things that made me dislike the game, so any option to change it is greatly appreciated. Aside from that, the game plays very similar, though now the explosion caused by enemies dying will clear nearby bullets and send them to your opponent's side. One thing I do have to mention is that all the Touhou games run at 60 frames per second and actually have a frame rate counter on screen, including Phantasmagoria of Flower View. But here, it really just doesn't feel like 60 FPS. The way the character moves feels an awful lot like Nuclear Throne, which is locked to 30 FPS. So while the game technically runs at 60, I have a sneaking suspicion that it's actually rendered at 30, which is weird to me. I'll also say that visually, the game really doesn't look great. It just looks uglier than the game before and after, and I'm not sure why. I promise I'm not just shitting on it because it's a head-to-head, but it's weird that it looks like this. Textures are less detailed. Character portraits are about the same as the previous game, meaning not good, and I don't know, things just kinda seem blurry and low-res in general. I honestly can't explain it, and I think the poor presentation does a lot to hurt this game as a whole. Overall, I'd say the game is decent enough. I'm still not a fan of the core design philosophy, but I had a pretty good time with this one. All the improvements the series made up to this point, plus the ability to change my charge type, really made a lot of difference. This is not my favorite of the series by a long shot, but I could see myself going back to it, especially if I was to play with a friend. Here we've got another spin-off variant of the traditional bullet hell gameplay, photography. Shoot the Bullet is not like other Touhou games in that on one hand it's a boss rush game, no standard waves of enemies, just bosses. Secondly, the goal is not to defeat the boss, but to take their picture. You'll be placed up against a boss's spell card, but you'll quickly notice two big deviations from standard play. Firstly, you only have the one life, so if you get hit, you're done. Next is that you can't actually attack, at least not in the standard sense. Instead, you have a camera that charges up over time, though you have the ability to substantially slow yourself down to charge it faster. Once fully charged, you can take a picture which will send out the frame from your body, which will rapidly shrink. Let it go and it snaps a picture of whatever's inside the frame. This will do two things. Firstly, if you capture the boss in frame, it'll reward points based on the quality of the picture, which is mostly determined by how much crap is in the picture, with more crap being worth more points. But there are also a variety of multipliers, such as if your character is also in frame, or if you're grazing at the moment the picture is taken. Secondly, any hazards that are in frame when the picture is taken are cleared, meaning your camera can be used defensively if you're about to be overwhelmed. Every time you take a successful picture, the boss will ramp up the difficulty. Same spell cards, so same basic design, but it gets harder to deal with. Collect enough pictures, the requirement varies anywhere from 3 to 10, and you clear the stage. Each boss has multiple stages to complete, though the exact amount varies. There are 10 levels plus an extra level. It's worth noting that you only have to do one spell card at a time. They're all self-contained, and you can actually tackle the spell cards on any given boss in any order you'd like. But it's not like the standard Touhou games where a single run will often take more than 20 minutes. Another thing worth mentioning is that this game does not actually have difficulty settings. There's just one difficulty for each stage, and let me tell you, that shit gets hard and gets hard fast. The stuff you're seeing on screen now is still towards the beginning. I put time into every game so I can have a solid idea of what I'm talking about in this video, and generally speaking, I try to at least attempt the various final bosses so I can experience the majority of what the game can offer a new player. With this game, due to the ramping difficulty, I called it on the third boss. Yes, third. Out of 10. There was just no way this video was going to get done in a timely manner if I didn't. So yeah, this game is tough as nails. So here's the thing, I actually really like this style of gameplay. It's such a unique take on the bullet hell format. It still retains the elements that players love, like the ability to dodge these pretty patterns and learn each stage so they can master it, but it brings with it a completely different way of approaching things, and it also comes with this really intense level of risk versus reward. Do you go for the high scoring shot? Do you get closer to the boss to try for that multiplier? Should you clear the bullets around you or save your camera for the boss? It requires an entirely different mindset going into it, and I love it. It's also nice to see that this game is much more something that you can just pick up for a few minutes if you don't have a block of time to dedicate. Maybe you have to leave the house in 15 minutes but still feel like a bit of Touhou. You can do that here, unlike the traditional ones. So overall, I think this game is fantastic. You know, as I was playing the games for this video, I was putting a decent amount of time into each one, and I was expecting to start feeling a bit of burnout at this point, but this change in the norm actually revitalized me, and I put a lot more time into Shoot the Bullet than I was originally planning, and it got me excited to keep on powering through the series. This is absolutely a game I'd recommend to anyone who has an interest in the franchise. It may not be perfectly representative of most of the games in the series, but it's still a great time. Like previous games, the core gameplay is the same. Standard Touhou stuff. Here the unique mechanic is called Faith, and it's actually pretty simple compared to most of the ones so far. In the bottom of the screen you'll see a number with a meter. Collect Faith pickups and the bar will fill and the number will go up. This number is your Faith, and it determines the value of point items when you pick them up. Killing enemies, grabbing pickups, and grazing will slightly fill the bar. If the bar drops to 0, your Faith will rapidly decrease. Overall, simple stuff. Do things in game to keep Faith high and point items are worth more. Stop doing things and the value goes down. You'll also lose a sizable amount of Faith if you get hit, a moderate amount if you run out of timer in a boss fight, and a small amount if you use a bomb, though there's actually no penalty for a death bomb. Now it's worth noting that the game has gone back to a score-based system for awarding extra lives rather than basing it on how many pickups you collect, so it's worth engaging with this mechanic even if your goal is just to survive. I will say that this mechanic can be a bit stressful, and it also feels like absolute bullshit during the sections that there are no enemies on screen. That's not an indictment of the system itself, however, the system at its core puts extra constraints on the core design of the game. Having these sections of no enemies just feels bad because it nukes your faith without you being able to do anything about it, so it makes certain stages feel worse than they are. Mercifully, the faith bar does not deplete during boss fights, so you can just focus on the fight itself. There were also a few nice quality of life improvements to Mountain of Faith, as well as a few alterations to core systems. Firstly, one of my favorite changes is that they made it so the point of collection is always active no matter what, and this change persisted through the rest of the series. No more max power requirement, no more focus requirement. The point of collection itself was a massive quality of life improvement, and I absolutely love that it's increased accessibility. Bosses now drop point items with yellow borders, which will magnet towards you when you get close and are worth the max value no matter when you collect them. A nice little change. Bosses now actually have indicators on their health bars to let you know what sections are spell cards, so you get a better idea of how much effective health the boss actually has. The power level system also got an overhaul. Instead of just having a numerical value that caps out at 128, it now goes from 0 to 5 with a decimal structure. Every whole number is a new power level. I think it makes a lot more sense to do it this way, and it's a lot clearer to the player. It also affects the balancing a bit, resulting in more common but less powerful power pickups. This combos pretty nicely with the new point of collection, and also makes it not as punishing if you miss a few, though to be fair, it wasn't particularly punishing before. Bombs also got a bit of an overhaul. Not in their use, but in that there's no longer a separate bomb inventory. Instead, using a bomb costs 1 full power level in addition to a bit of faith. I'm personally not a fan of this. The Touhou games usually have some sort of penalty for bombing related to their unique mechanics, and it also invalidates spell card bonuses. Having a power level cost on top of that, especially when it amounts to 20% of the maximum, is just excessive. Not a huge fan, and it makes me even less likely to want to engage with them unless the alternative is guaranteed death. You also don't get a bonus at the end of the stages, unlike other games. Instead, when you beat the final stage, or the extra stage if that's what you're doing, you'll get a big score bonus based on your remaining lives, your power, and your faith. So another thing I want to mention is that at this point in the series, the developer did some work on the engine and I noticed it almost immediately. It's not super noticeable when watching a video, but the game just feels really good to play. Movement feels incredibly smooth and the controls are tighter than ever. I mean, it was pretty good before, and even back in the PC 98 era, it was never anywhere close to bad. But starting with Mountain of Faith, everything took a bit of a step up. It's really hard to articulate it, but I really enjoy the game on a mechanical level. I will say that difficulty-wise, it's a bit of a step up from previous games. The developer pretty much built this game up from scratch rather than building it off previous mainline games, and a few features did get removed. Notably spell practice, which is a move I personally disagree with, as I highly value built-in learning tools for difficult games. On a surface level, Mountain of Faith is a fairly simple game as far as Touhou goes, with a somewhat bland, unique mechanic. However, the overhauls to existing systems underneath the surface do add a lot, and even though I don't approve of every single change, I do think it was a net positive and that this is a very satisfying game to play. Okay, so this one's a bit weird, but let's start off with the basics. Like before, same core gameplay mechanics. Take a shot every time I've said that so far. The scoring mechanics are actually very simple. Aside from the normal shit that awards points, you'll notice two numbers in the bottom of the screen that determine the value of point items. The height at which you collect the items doesn't actually matter in this game. The first is the base value, which is variable but can only ever go up to twice its starting point. The second is a multiplier. There's also the communication gauge right above it that looks like old school cell phone bars. The way it works is that your communication gauge provides a boost to the multiplier from 0 to 1. Grazing bullets will raise this gauge, but it decreases very rapidly. If you go above the point of collection, the gauge will be maxed out. It's effectively instantaneous, but technically can take up to 2 frames for a full charge. You'll also get a very small grace period before it starts decreasing again, depending on how long you were above the point of collection. The multiplier can also be permanently raised independent of the communication gauge by gating a lot of grazes. The multiplier will go up by 0.01 per 100 grazes, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it isn't, but it does stack throughout the entire game up to a maximum of 8.99, plus whatever your communication gauge bonus is. Additionally, they changed up how grazing works on lasers and certain special boss attacks. You've always been able to continually graze these for as long as you were near them, as opposed to the normal 1 graze per bullet limit. Subterranean Animism significantly raised the rate of grazes for these hazards up to somewhere near 15 times per second. I'm not the hugest fan of this new multiplier system, but I like the core idea. I think the biggest hindrance is how bad it feels in the early game, considering the multiplier starts at 0 without the communication gauge boost. Point items still do give you a minimum of 10 points, but let's be real, that's basically nothing. It does not feel good to collect a point item and get fuck all from it. I think this could have been resolved by having it start out at a number that's not 0 or to raise the minimum point value, because the premise is actually pretty solid, it's just that the execution could have been better. But okay, now let's talk about the interesting part of Subterranean Animism. Instead of picking a standard shot type alongside your character like in most games, you'll instead choose an assistant. This will act like a shot type, but it'll also give you a unique passive effect that can significantly change the way you play. For example, Reimu with Suika lets you auto-collect items below the point of collection when you aren't focusing or firing. Marisa with Alice doubles your max power level. It's really an interesting system, and it actually adds an extra level of complexity for skilled players because some of the configurations are the kind of things that newer and inexperienced players wouldn't really be able to fully utilize. Like Marisa with Patchouli, which lets you switch between different attack styles. Difficult to use effectively, but it's the most versatile character and shot type configuration the series has seen up to this point. In case it wasn't obvious, I really do like this. Options are almost always a good thing, and I feel this was done in a way that it doesn't completely overwhelm players who don't want to engage with the crazy levels of complexity because they can just choose a simpler configuration with a simpler effect. You once again get bonuses for clearing a stage. I guess the developer realized that it was a good feature. That being said, the math that goes into it is much simpler than previous games, only varying based on the stage number and how many lives you have. Instead of a you get an extra life at this point system, bosses will instead start dropping fragments of extra lives, often as a reward for clearing spell cards. Once you collect 5 of them, that's an extra life. It's a nice system overall. I do think that it's better when score plays a role in extra lives, but I also think it's good for players to be consistently rewarded for smaller feats of skill by a fraction of a life rather than just the infrequent extra life system from earlier. And let's be real here, an extra life is a sizable reward in a game like Touhou. Power also caps out at 4 rather than 5. Not super impactful as the game is balanced around it. Aside from that, the game is pretty much the same as previous ones. If you like them, you'll like this one. Having so many varied options is nice. The few systems that got touched up generally ended up better because of it. It's a solid game. Undefined Fantastic Object, and I fucking love that name by the way, doesn't do all that much to change things up aside from its unique mechanic, the UFOs. Basically, there are marked enemies in the stages that'll drop little colored UFOs that'll fly around the screen and will not be auto-collected above the point of collection. There are red ones, blue ones, and green ones. Some shift between the 3 colors, some are static. The goal is to either collect 3 of a single color or 1 of each. Doing so will summon a big UFO for 10 seconds. It'll suck in all item pickups for as long as it's on screen. The more it sucks in, the more points it's worth. Plus, if you fill it entirely, you'll get an extra reward depending on what color it is. Shooting it down will make it spit out a small UFO with other rewards depending on its color. You'll also auto-collect every item the UFO sucked in. If the UFO leaves, you lose the pickups. Furthermore, if you collect any small UFOs while the big UFO is around, point item value will go up by 1000. That and grazing are the only ways to increase item point value. The color of the UFO depends on what UFOs you collected to obtain it. 3 of a single color rewards a big boy of the same color. 1 of each makes it flash. Red UFOs give 1 life piece for destroying it and an extra 1 for filling it up. Green will give a bomb piece for shooting it down, those work the same as life pieces for bombs, and a full bomb for filling it. Blue doesn't give any special item rewards, but filling it makes it worth a massive 8 times its standard value in points. Flashing UFOs will give you an extra small UFO, and any items it sucks up will be reversed when you shoot it down, so point items become power items and vice versa. The enemies that spawn these little UFOs and what kind they spit out are predetermined, so with time you can actually prepare and plan for these. I personally really like this system. It's fun, the UFOs add a nice little extra thing to deal with, and you can customize the way you want to play based on your skill and goals. If you're a highly skilled player, you can focus on blue and flashing UFOs, whereas if you're just trying to survive, you can focus on red and green depending on your playstyle. Plus, having a big in-your-face mechanic like this is something I find enjoyable. Something like Faith or Subterranean Animism's multiplier system are perfectly fine, but they're just kinda there as a side effect of you playing the regular game. I like having a system that I can directly interact with. But aside from the UFO system, there isn't really much new to talk about in Undefined Fantastic Object except that, as I mentioned earlier, bombs no longer cost power levels. Again, I disliked that mechanic, so I'm glad it's been reverted. But overall, good game. It's also worth noting that there is a game listed as Touhou 12.3, but I won't be giving it its own section because it's designed as an expansion to Undefined Fantastic Object and even references that save file to determine unlocks. Gameplay-wise, it's identical, so I don't feel it's really worth dedicating time to. Oh yeah, we got another photography game. I'm not going to go too in-depth on this one because for the most part it's the same game as Shoot the Bullet, just with new levels, but that's not a bad thing. More photography is not something I'm going to complain about. There are a few changes. On the smaller side, the bonus and multiplier system got touched up a tiny bit and it's now a little more clear. Not entirely clear, but better than before. You can also change the orientation of your shot between portrait and landscape, which is nice but not ridiculously impactful, though it can make a difference during certain encounters. The biggest change is that you can unlock a second character, Hatate, after clearing the 4th boss, which is an achievement in itself. She'll play very similarly, except her camera will charge at double speed, will be in a wider aspect ratio, and is much harder to aim at a distance. I wouldn't say that either has the definitive edge on the other overall, and it's ultimately going to be up to personal preference. Other than that, double spoiler is the exact same game as Shoot the Bullet. Great fun and highly recommended. Okay, I've been excited to start talking about this one since I started writing the script for this video. This is another spin-off and it's based around the freeze mechanic. So you play as this arrogant, ditzy little shit of an ice fairy and I fucking love her. The way it works is that you have the ability to freeze enemies and bullets. Your ability will slowly charge, though it gains bonus charge as you deal damage with your regular attack, and you'll get partially recharged when you perform a really good freeze. What it does is that you can do a charge fire that'll freeze the area around you and any bullets or enemies that happen to be there. This will then chain to nearby enemies and bullets, which get cleared after a short time. You can use it from 30% charge, but the more it's charged, the longer the freeze lasts, meaning more chance for it to get a lot of bullets and enemies. Let me tell you, this is so goddamn satisfying to play. I mean, when the whole screen gets frozen, it feels so amazing. Now, it's not all easy mode when it comes to freezing. Fireballs cannot be frozen, and laser beams will actually break ice into shards that can hurt you, so you'll still have to keep your brain on when you're freezing. Instead of a normal lives system, Great Fairy Wars has motivation, with 100% motivation being equal to 1 life, and it caps out at 1000%. You get motivation by killing enemies and freezing. The better the freeze, the more motivation you get. Bombs work in a similar system, represented as Perfect Freeze, with 100% equal to 1 bomb, capping out at 300%. This meter will slowly charge up, and using it will freeze everything on screen except lasers. This is the only way to freeze fireballs. There's also a unique take on power levels in that there aren't any. Instead, believe it or not, there's a level up system. Killing and freezing will make progress towards a level up, at which point it acts pretty much the same as a power up. Though instead of the 4 or 5 power levels of other Touhou games, Little Shit Fairy can get up to level 16. Instead of picking between different characters, you only have the one in Great Fairy Wars. You pick between different routes, which are effectively just similar but still unique sets of levels, each with diverging paths as you progress. It can be a little annoying to have to learn all the different stages, but if you're a completionist, you'll get plenty of mileage out of this game. It's worth noting that the bullet patterns you deal with in general are harder than the other games, but that's because you can regularly just freeze them away. I absolutely love this game. It's a very pretty and fun way to play Touhou, and I think out of all the games, this one has my favorite dialogue. Basically, Little Shit Fairy, who's actually called Cerno, declared war on the other fairies because they destroyed her home. The other fairies want to join up with her so they can fuck with humans together, and destroying her home was basically an attempt to strong-arm her. What makes this fun for me is that the other fairies keep trying to recruit her, and she's on that pure fairy ADHD. They'll be like, hey, come join us and we can mess with humans together, and Cerno will be like, okay, yeah, that sounds like fun. Wait a minute, I declared war on you. It's just so goofy, and it dials the absurdist humor of the series up a notch. While the other games certainly have funny dialogue, there's still a grounded sense of purpose to what the characters are doing and real stakes at play. Great Fairy Wars is just about Cerno going on a rampage, and it's fantastic. Overall, the game is just so much fun. I love the freeze mechanic, and like I said earlier, it just feels good to play. I consider this one a must-play. Okay, so we're back to the standard bullet hell again. Here we have another one with fairly simple unique mechanic. As before, same core principles, however you'll notice a new floaty pickup that doesn't get auto-collected. These are spirits. Green and purple spirits act as bomb and life pieces respectively. Blue spirits will increase your item point value. All spirits will charge the trance meter at the bottom of the screen, with gray spirits awarding points plus fill in the gauge more than other spirits. When the gauge is full at 3 flames, you can manually enter trance mode at any time. This will give you a shield, not unlike the supernatural border from Perfect Cherry Blossom. While this shield is up, all spirits aside from gray spirits become more valuable, with blue spirits especially benefiting, and your attack becomes stronger. This will last 10 seconds or until you get hit. If you get hit, trance ends, but you do not lose a life. It's worth noting that trance will invalidate spell card bonuses even if activated before the spell card, so be careful. If you get hit, you will automatically go into trance, and it'll last proportionate to how much the gauge was already filled, after which you'll die as normal. Interestingly, you can actually do a death trance in the same way as a death bomb, though I've heard that the grace period is very short. I did some searching, but I couldn't actually find out exactly how much that window is. One interesting thing is that bosses will continually spit out blue spirits as you damage them, but they'll spit them out more the closer you get, so some players will make it a point to be right up against the boss as much as they can so they can boost their item point value. This is called boss grazing. Most new players probably won't want to do this, but it may encourage them to get just a little bit closer to the bosses rather than hugging the bottom of the screen, which they shouldn't be doing anyway. Another minor change is that the bonus for clearing a stage is just stage number times 1 million. You do get a bigger bonus based on your lives and bombs at the end of the game. So yeah, not much more to say about it. I like it, it works. Doesn't particularly stand out to me, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. The spirits are pretty fun to collect, and as always, the game itself has fun stages and interesting bosses. Double Dealing Character has arguably the simplest unique mechanic of the franchise. The big bonus you get is from utilizing the point of collection. The more items you auto-collect at once, you may get a point bonus to the items collected added on top of their base value. This value can go from 0.5 to 2 depending on how many items you've nabbed. If you manage to get any bonus, you get a reward. You'll get bomb pieces as the first 4 rewards and a life piece on the 5th, after which the cycle resets. If you manage to nab a bonus of 2, the cycle will not progress and instead you'll get a guaranteed life piece and the cycle will resume from where it left off. That's it. Interestingly, point value is actually not directly related to this game's unique mechanic, unlike how it is in most other Touhou games, or at least the ones where you can actually increase your point value. Here, point value is increased via pickups and grazing. I don't really have much more to say about this game. Its unique mechanic is extremely simple and it doesn't really change anything underneath the hood. It's mostly just more of the Touhou that we all know and love. If you like the core gameplay loop, you'll like Double Dealing Character. Impossible Spell Card is another spin-off with a unique concept. Here the entire premise is that you'll have to do a boss rush against spell cards that are impossible to survive. They're actually not, but we'll get into that later. So the player character Seija figures that if they're cheating, she can cheat too. You get these magical items as you clear the different stages that'll allow you to do some really crazy shit like temporarily phase out so bullets can pass through you, destroy bullets with a camera like the photography game, teleportation, and more. You can choose one magical item, though you later unlock a slot for a secondary item. An item in the secondary slot will grant either a unique passive or a limited or weaker version of its active effect. So as the title and description of the game suggest, the bullet patterns are much more difficult than usual to account for the fact that you can, and are expected to, cheat by using magical items. The game tracks which bosses are cleared with which items, and whenever you clear a boss with an item, it gains experience points and can level up, becoming just a little bit stronger or gaining extra uses. Like the photography games, you have a single short boss encounter with no bombs and 1 life. It also has no difficulty settings. Now earlier I said that the premise is that the bosses are using, as the title implies, impossible spell cards. Well, while all cards are extremely difficult, they aren't actually impossible. In fact, every single boss can be cleared without using any magical items, though they each require extreme knowledge and precision. If you manage to get a no item clear, the game will mark that boss as having been completed with every item you currently have unlocked. Very useful and a nice in-game reward for players who go above and beyond. Impossible Spellcard also has an achievement system called Nicknames, with 70 achievements with requirements ranging from clearing the first level all the way to getting no item clears on every single stage. Good luck with that one. This game is probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest of the series, and even early on, I was encountering serious roadblocks in clearing some of the bosses, even abusing the magical items as much as I could. It's still a ton of fun and a really neat take on the series, but I think I need to improve as a bullet hell player before I'll really be able to appreciate it. I do like this game a lot, though I'll admit that I don't think I'm quite ready for it. I do recommend this game, just not to new players. Okay, Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom is kinda chaotic, but I kinda love it as well. You know how the last couple of mainline Touhou games have mostly had very simple, direct, unique mechanics? Well, that's all gone out the fucking window. This game has several unique systems that all play into one another. Firstly, all stages are divided into chapters. Every time you complete a chapter, you're given bonus points based on the percentage of enemies you managed to kill and how much grazing you did. If this bonus is 1 million points or more, you'll get a bomb or life piece on top of the points. Simple enough to start off. At the start of a run, you're given the option of 2 different game modes, Legacy and Point Device. Legacy functions pretty much exactly the same as previous Touhou games with the standard lives and continue system. In this mode, the chapter rewards are always life pieces. While extra lives are pretty generous in this mode, bombs are actually fairly rare. Point Device is interesting. Here, the general concept is that this mode is a more modernized way to play, a bit of a departure from the arcade-styled system we're used to. But that doesn't mean it's easy. Far from it. In Point Device, you have only 1 life with no way to gain more, but you get a checkpoint at the end of each chapter. These checkpoints act effectively as save states, so you retain everything you had at that point, including bombs, whether or not you use them before dying. In this mode, the chapter rewards are always bomb pieces. The last system is an update to grazing, so earlier I mentioned that the chapter rewards are partially based on how much grazing you do. That means that grazing is extremely important if you want a steady supply of lives or bombs depending on what game mode you're playing. To accommodate for this, Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom is the only Touhou game where you can actually graze more than once per bullet. The way it works is that you'll get 1 graze for the initial contact, up to 5 more the longer you stay there, and if you can max it out, it'll pop out a little pickup that'll give you an extra 5 grazes. Note that it's still faster to graze on lasers if they're available. Additionally, items will actually slow their fall as long as you're actively grazing. Now, all this shit is pretty convoluted, but I really like it. The game modes are very innovative, and I'm actually kinda disappointed that Point Device doesn't make a return in future games, though it would have to be adjusted to the fact that the chapter system is also unique to Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom. I do really like the new grazing system. It's so much fun to dick around with, and it's just another thing that rewards highly skilled players. And on top of that, it's just so very satisfying. Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom is a ton of fun. I really like these mechanics, and it's fun to play around with them. Plus, I can imagine that Point Device could appeal to a lot of players, the kind who want to just throw themselves at a challenge over and over but don't want to always have to start out from the beginning. Plus, having these short, defined sections can give you a good benchmark for improvement. Overall, I'd say that this is one of my favorites in the series. Hidden Star in 4 Seasons isn't quite as simple as some of the earlier games, but it also isn't as complex as Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom. The game hinges on its unique season and release mechanic. The way this works is that you select your character and shot type as per usual, though the shot types come with an additional season condition that affects the unique release ability. As you break shit and graze, you'll gain season items that fill a gauge up to 6 times. Hit the C button if at least one bar is filled and you'll fully drain that gauge and release, which is a circular aura that destroys bullets and grants you item point value based on how many bullets get destroyed. The more bars are charged, the more powerful the release. The different releases grant you different types of circles. Spring is very quick to dissipate but affects a large area and gives you some iframes. Summer is very small and fairly quick to dissipate, but it only uses a 1 charge no matter how many you have stockpiled. Autumn locks onto you and boosts your movement speed. Winter lasts a long time and boosts your damage for as long as it's up. It's a neat system. I mean, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't intrigue me as much as a lot of the other mechanics in the rest of the series. Again, I have no actual problems with it on a design level, but I end up feeling like I'd just rather play a different Touhou game. But that's very subjective, and I'd imagine that there are players out there who'd absolutely love it, because it is interesting and it does have a decent amount of skill expression to it. Plus, having 4 seasons per character to play around with gives a lot of mileage for completionists. So overall, not really my favorite, but that's a subjective thing. Violet Detector is yet another photography game, though this time it's a little different. The main character, Sumirako, is taking pictures so she can post them on social media. Now, as a YouTuber, I fully understand the compulsion to seek out validation of strangers on the internet, so I'm on board. Violet Detector differs from Shoot the Bullet and Double Spoiler in a couple ways. Firstly and most noticeably, there is no more requirement for a certain number of photos. Instead, the bosses just have normal-ass health bars and you have access to your regular attack. The camera will take off a sizable chunk of the boss's health, and you do need to take at least one picture of the boss for the level to be marked as complete. Furthermore, taking pictures is the best way to rack up points. Another change is that you can unlock superpowers for use in the fights as you progress, starting with a teleportation ability. It's pretty tough to learn, but it offers a lot of options once you get the hang of it. The bonus system is changed to be in line with the fact that your character is a social media fanatic, with the bonuses being given out as hashtags, which are for the most part self-explanatory. For example, if you take a picture of a boss and they have not been damaged, you get hashtag no scratches on them. There's also a nickname system in this game as well. Works pretty much the same as Impossible spell card. I will say that it feels like changing it from a photo requirement to a health requirement is kind of pointless. After all, if you're actively charging your camera, you can't fire, so what's even the point? It's not like it really matters, but I don't see the reasoning. This game is definitely a bit more quirky than the others due to the nature of the protagonist, and you get a nice little blurb after each stage where she's basically just being a bratty teenager. It's amusing at least. Overall, I like it a lot. The superpowers are a bitch and a half to learn, and like Impossible spell card, I think I need to get better at Touhou in general before I really dive into this one. Still, it's a ton of fun and I'd recommend it. Wily Beast and Wicked Creature is an interesting one, and it feels very reminiscent of Undefined Fantastic Object. The main gimmick of this game is its spirit mechanic. As you play, certain enemies will drop spirits. The most common are beast spirits, which cycle between wolf, otter, and eagle. There are also fish spirits that contain items when released. More on that a bit later. Once you collect 5 of any spirit, you'll enter Roar mode. This is another mechanic similar to the Supernatural Border, where you'll gain a shield for a bit of time, and damaging enemies will drop point items that increase item point value. Additionally, at the end of the Roar, you'll gain any fish spirit items you'd collected, and if you manage to make it through without getting hit, 2 beast spirits will pop out. If you collect a beast spirit during a Roar, the duration will be extended a bit. Collecting a fish spirit will just automatically drop its items. If you enter Roaring mode with at least 3 of the same beast spirit, you'll gain a special effect on top of the standard Roar effect. Wolf will greatly power up your focus attack and have it fire off regardless whether you're focused or not. Eagle will do the same but for your unfocused attack. Otter will spawn 3 orbs that rotate around you, destroying any bullets it comes into contact with, converting them into items that boost your item point value. On top of this, instead of a standard shot type selection, you choose a spirit companion, either a wolf, an otter, or an eagle. These will each grant you a passive effect as well as altering your dialogue a bit. Additionally, they'll make it so that if you gain the roar effect that corresponds to your companion, it lasts longer. You can also collect a unique spirit from each mini-boss if you beat them while fulfilling certain hidden requirements. I won't tell you what they are, but they're all pretty straightforward and there are hints in-game. The spirits act kinda like fish spirits in that they contain useful items. They'll pretty much all contain multiple beast spirits as well as at least 1 fish spirit. Useful, though not mandatory for a good run. There's also a proper achievement system in this game. Just saying, there's an achievement for beating the game on Lunatic without getting hit. Good luck. Overall, I really like this system. It's fun, you can strategize, and the roars themselves are fun as hell to play around with. I also do like how the dialogue changes based on your spirit companion altering your personality. It's not major, but it's a nice little bit of flair. I'd say that on a technical level, this is a very clean and polished game, and of course, it's built on all the improvements made throughout the rest of the series. Definitely a fun game, and honestly, it might be one I'd recommend to new players. The mechanics are simple enough, and the companions are all effectively the same across all characters. So so they won't overwhelm new players with options, which admittedly can happen in some of the older games. It's a pretty good game. So there you have it. This is how the Touhou Project has evolved from 1996 to 2019. The series is still ongoing, and I have no doubt we'll be seeing more in the future, especially since the fanbase is showing no signs of slowing down. I personally had a blast playing through this series, and I enjoyed every single one except for Phantasmagoria of Dimensional Dream. I was never the biggest bullet hell player, though I did dip my toes into it here and there. Playing Touhou from start to finish has sparked a desire in me to get good at these games, and I will 100% be going back and playing some of them. At the very least, I want to experience and beat the extra stages, something I know I'm not up to at the moment. So which of these games would I recommend? Well, I think all the games have merit and warrant consideration. A few stand out among the crowd. Of the PC98 era, you should absolutely play Highly Responsive to Prayers because of how unique it is. Mystic Square is also a step above the rest, and you can tell that the design of the boss attacks was really starting to come together. Embodiment of Scarlet is the single most iconic game of the franchise, and the extra stage fight against Flandra Scarlet is something that tends to stick with people. The photography games are great, and I definitely recommend taking a look at them for their unique mechanics and for how easy they are to just pick up if you're short on time. Undefined Fantastic Object is great fun, and the UFO system is really rewarding without being too overwhelming. Great Fairy Wars is an absolute must-play. The freezing mechanic is so much fun, and I'm kinda sad it's the only one like it. 10 Desires is pretty neat, easy to understand, but very skill-expressive considering you have the ability to perform boss grazing. Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom is just fantastic. I love it to death, and its unique grazing system is so incredibly fun. Wily Beast and Weakest Creature is surprisingly friendly for new players, and as the most recent release, it has the combined quality of life that comes from almost 25 years of working on the same series. I'd still recommend trying any and all of these games, if only so you can go on the same journey that I did. To see a series grow and improve over such a long period of time is a rare treat, and you know what? Even if this video completely flops, I'm glad I did it. It was a great experience and I learned a lot from it. I had the opportunity to personally witness the ongoing evolution of the Touhou Project. Thanks for watching. This video took quite a bit of time to make, so if you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Not only does this pad my ego, it lets YouTube know that my content is worth watching, and it makes it more likely that my content will reach more eyeballs. I do want to make this style of video a regular thing where I go through a game series and see how it changed from beginning to end. Probably won't be doing another series with over 20 games, but if you have any ideas on which series could use the evolution treatment, leave a comment and I'll at least consider it. Well, once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Play the electro swing.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.